You can definitely feel the power compared to F3, and also the turbo as well. You can definitely feel when that kicks in. You can also feel the weight of the car. It's obviously quite a bit heavier than the F3 car. And also the sort of difference of going between the 13-inch and the 18-inch rims. I could tell sort of immediately the effect that it had on the car, which has made it is a very difficult car to drive. I think because of the weight and also the 18-inch rims, it makes the car very unforgiving. So yeah, I think it's a tough car to drive. It's pretty fun to drive as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think our 2021 preparations are looking good. I spent a good amount of time over Christmas and New Year's in Australia with my family, so it was good to see them again and enjoy some warm weather and a majorly COVID-free environment. So yeah, nice time to relax. Obviously back into the swing of things now and getting ready, preparing with the team, doing all the simulator training and physical training as well. We've had a good training camp with Alpine as well in Tenerife, which was good. And yeah, I'm feeling very well prepared. I think having 3 races in a weekend is going to be a bit more hectic than we're used to, particularly for the teams. Obviously, it's one more session added into the weekend, and it's going to make our Saturdays particularly busy with the 2 races. So it's going to put quite a bit of stress on the mechanics and engineers and stuff, going from race 1 to race 2. And then even for the drivers, you know, we have to recover well enough between the first 2 races as well. So I think in terms of the format and the way the reverse grid works and stuff like that, I think as a driver, if you're qualifying up the front, surviving race 1 is going to be your main goal, so you can stay in the reverse grid for race 2, and then obviously try and get some good points in at least race 2 and then race 3, where hopefully you've qualified well. But yeah, looking forward to it. I think it'll be very exciting for all the fans to watch. Even more F2 track time. So yeah, what's not to like about that? Yeah, I think the format will be quite tough on the teams. Obviously Saturdays are very busy now with the 2 races, and then we have the feature race on the Sunday. So hopefully I don't give any extra work to the mechanics in the first 2 races, so that they're fresh for the pit stops on the Sunday. But yeah, obviously if we have any damage, especially in race 1, it's going to put a lot of stress on the teams to get the car ready again for race 2. So I think it'll be a pretty tough year. Luckily, they're spaced out pretty evenly, so they've got a bit of time to rest. Yeah, the calendar is interesting. Obviously, it's very different to what it's been in the past. And obviously 8 race weekends instead of 12 as well, so we've got a lot of gaps in between those races. To be honest, in terms of the tracks we visit, I think there's actually quite a few tracks that the F2 boys from last year would have missed. Baku, for example, everyone that was in their first year of F2 last year didn't go. So providing we make it to Baku, then obviously that's it's going to be a first experience for pretty much all of the grid, or certainly most of it. Monaco I've been to myself twice in Formula Renault, so it's obviously it'll be different in F2, but it's not a new circuit for me. And then yeah, Saudi, no one's been there before. We don't even know what the track looks like yet, so pretty level playing field there. So I think obviously, especially with the 2 street circuits, it'll probably play into the hands of the experienced guys more. With car knowledge, but there's no reason why rookies can't be fighting for wins everywhere. I think pit stops are a cool thing to learn. Obviously, they're a big part of F1. So naturally, I'm trying to get to F1, so I've got to do pit stops at some point. But yeah, I think you can win or lose a lot of time in the pit stops. I think it's something that as a driver and a team that we have to focus on a lot. And it's sort of the only direct team influence during a race in junior single seaters. Obviously they're setting up the car, but the team can only tell you stuff on the radio normally. So I think it's a good way to incorporate the team into the races. Obviously it's just a feature race, but it really sort of brings the team together and also creates a cool atmosphere, I guess, for the fans and as well. Sort of bringing in a mini F1 race, if you will, with including the pit stop. I think with the two reverse grids this year, I still think qualifying will be very important. Obviously, qualifying at the front is a disadvantage for race one, but as long as you survive, then if you qualify pole and end up starting 10th, as long as you survive and still finish in the top 10, then you've still got race two, where you'll be starting up the front, and then obviously race three, the feature race with more points, you'll still be starting up the front, regardless of what happens in the first two races. So I think there's a good chance for everyone sort of in the top 10 to especially have a good first two races. Obviously if you're qualifying towards the back end of the top 10, you've got a better starting position for race one, and hopefully you're out of the mess of the midfield a little bit. So hopefully you can try and guarantee yourself sort of two decent points finishes. But yeah, I think qualifying will still be important. I mean, as long as you survive race one and stay in the top 10, you'll still have two races starting up the front. So yeah. F2 season this year starting Bahrain. I've done a lot of laps at Bahrain in the last 6 months. I think the only track I've driven at since the F3 season ended has been Bahrain. So I can probably do it with my eyes shut by the end of the race weekend. But yeah, it's an interesting track. The layout, not as fast as places like Silverstone and stuff like that, but I think it provides very exciting racing. Obviously, it's a very high deg circuit, so I think it really spices things up in the races, and time management is even more critical than it already is. So yeah, I think it'll be an interesting start to the year. Hopefully we actually get started, because we were supposed to go in F3 and we didn't. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it and getting stuck into my rookie F2 year. I think for my first result, I think it depends on where we are as a team. If we've got the capability to win, then I want to try and win. Obviously, that's how the F3 season started, so I know I can do it. But if we've got the capability to finish 10th, then I want to try and finish 10th, or exceed what we thought was possible. So I think it depends a lot on what sort of shape we are as a team, because it's not just up to me to decide the result in this sport. I think time management everywhere is going to be important, but I think it's most important at Bahrain. Well, I haven't done any F2 races yet, but looking from the outside, Bahrain always looks like a very high deg circuit. Obviously, in the past, we've seen in the sprint races people doing pit stops. I think Charles was sort of the first one to master that a few years ago. So yeah, I think that speaks of itself how high deg the nature of the track is. So I think managing your tyres is a crucial part, and arguably more important than having outright pace. Yeah, so from my first experience in F2 in Bahrain, tyre management was definitely a massive key. to being quick and being successful. Obviously, it's important to still have tyres left on your car by the end of the race. So I think we've seen some pretty dramatic performance drop-offs due to tyre degradation. So yeah, it's certainly something that I'm going to try and master as good as I can. I think my tyre management in F3 was pretty good. And yeah, I think that the races in general were one of my stronger points. So hopefully I can carry that forwards. And yeah, I think obviously with the longer races as well, tyre management comes more into play in F2 than F3. In F3 it was, we were pushing for pretty much all the race, and F2, if my first experiences are anything to go by, then you definitely can't do the same. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how I learn that. I drove the F1 car, I think it was end of October last year, and yeah, I was sort of pleasantly surprised at sort of the physical demands. Obviously it's got power steering, which is a massive help. My neck was still pretty sore the day after, but generally I held up pretty well. And I think F2 is so physically challenging, mainly because of the lack of power steering. I mean, it's challenging in all the junior categories that we don't have power steering, but I think in F2, given how heavy the car is and sort of just the geometry of the car, the steering is quite heavy, especially in high-speed corners. So yeah, making sure you've got some big enough arms to be able to hang on is super important. Also, you've got to hit the brake pedal pretty hard as well. So yeah, I would say definitely on the arms it's a lot tougher than F1, and also probably on the braking as well. I think I'll approach F2 quite similar to what I did F3, and even in F3 I was making sure I was learning first and foremost, and then the success was sort of just a side point to that, a very nice side point. But I think making sure I learned as much as I could, as quickly as I could, put me in good stead for the beginning of the year. Obviously F2, there's a few more variables to learn. I've got to learn pit stops, compound changes, managing the tyres a lot more. So yeah, there's still a lot of learning to do, but in terms of expectations and stuff like that, I'm going into it pretty open-minded, which is what I did for F3. Didn't have too many expectations. Obviously this year I'd like to be challenging Robert. I think your teammate's always your first and best measure of how you're doing, so hopefully I can beat him more often than not. My goals for 2021, very good question. I don't really have any sort of concrete things I want to achieve. Obviously I want to be fighting for race wins and hopefully the championship. Obviously fighting for the title in your rookie year's no easy feat, so it's going to be tough. But I said the same about F3. So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, yeah, want to be pushing for race wins. Would like to be pushing for pole positions as well. It's something that I'd like to get that I didn't get last year as well. So, and yeah, obviously we've got to see how competitive we are as a team. If we've got the capability to be winning every race, then I want to be trying to win every race. If we've got the capability to be finishing P5 or P6, hopefully we don't. Hopefully we've got the capability to win. But if that's all we've got on the day, then I want to be trying to maximise the most out of the car. So yeah, I think it's quite situation and how the team's going dependent. I'm looking forward to improving qualifying. Yeah, I think that's obviously something that I want to improve and probably was my definitely wasn't my strength last year. I think also learning the tyres, the tyre management side of things in F2 is a massive part. And I think we saw a lot with Mick last year that necessarily not qualifying up the front wasn't necessarily a limiting factor. And also if I can learn how to do mix lightning starts, then that's also going to help. So I think the tyre management in the races is going to be a massive key. Obviously, we've got one qualifying session and 3 races, so yeah, it's important to get the races right more than the qualifying, well, as long as you're in the top 10. And yeah, I think those are the main points to improve. So yeah, being in the Alpine Academy is really good. Started my second year with everyone there. Obviously, was previously the Renault Sport Academy. But yeah, it's been really good so far. Obviously, they gave me my first F1 test, so it's been a good relationship. Yeah, I think obviously being my second year now and stepping up to F2, sort of the level of involvement in the F1 team and the academy for that matter, you know, with the engineers and stuff like that from the F1 team has increased, especially after the F1 test as well. Obviously there's a bit more for me to dive into as well. We had our training camp in Tenerife this year and we didn't get stuck locked down in Tenerife, so that was a good start. And yeah, their support's been really good so far. And you know, they were very helpful in the F2 test in Bahrain last year as well. You know, so I've got not just PREMA to fall back on in terms of looking through data and information. I've also got Alpine Academy and the F1 team, for that matter, in my corner as well. Yeah, the academy has their RS18 sort of testing program in place. So that'll still be running throughout the course of this year. If my results are good and I know what I have to do, then yes, there are F1 opportunities. There's none set in stone at the moment, but I know that there are chances for me to drive an F1 car again, providing my results are good enough. So yeah, hopefully there's a few more F1 outings this year.